Each week, there may be someone for whom our congregation is a lifeline. Maybe they need the tolerance and acceptance offered in liberal religion. Maybe they need a community to support and encourage their growing soul. We hope to always be ready to welcome the stranger into our midst and give them a place of shelter. As we gather together, we let our light shine out into the world, promoting peace, tolerance, and justice.
While love is unfashionable, let us live unfashionably, seeing the world a complex ball in small hands. Love our blackest garment. Let us be poor in all but truth, in courage handed down by the old spirits. Let us be intimate with ancestral ghosts and music of the undead. While love is dangerous, let us walk bareheaded beside the great river. Let us gather blossoms under fire.
The very thought of you makes my heart sing like an April breeze on the wings of spring, and you appear in all your splendor, my one and only love. The shadows fall and spread their misty charms in the hush of night, while you're in my arms. I feel your lips so warm and tender, my one and only love. The touch of your hand, it's like heaven, a heaven that I've never known. The blush on your cheek whenever I speak tells me you are my own. You fill my eager heart with such desire. Every kiss that you give sets my soul on fire. I give myself in sweet surrender, my one and only
Please recite with me our shared affirmation of mission. This fellowship is a welcoming, diverse, and nurturing beloved community that promotes progressive religious thought and practice to create a more loving, just, and sustainable world.
You fill up my senses like a night in a forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a walk in the rain, like a storm in the desert, like a sleepy blue ocean. You fill up my senses, come fill me again. Come, let me love you, let me give my life to you. Let me drown in your laughter, let me die in your arms. Let me lay down beside you, let me always be with you. Come, let me love you, come love me again. Let me love you, come love me again. You fill up my senses like a night in a forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a walk in the rain, like a storm in the desert, like a sleepy blue ocean. You fill up my senses, come fill me again.
We call this light before us in hope that we may always remain a strong community. Throughout the year to come, and always in our lives, may we know we are loved. May we share the love we have, and may we be the love we wish to see.
The following is a reading, which is an excerpt from Jailbird by Kurt Vonnegut, Jr.
I had just greeted Leland Clues when the shopping bag lady, whose voice was loud and piercing, cried out,
Oh my God! Walter F. Starbuck, is that really you?
I don't intend to reproduce her accent here on the printed page. I thought she was crazy. I thought she would have parroted any name Clues chose to hang on me. If she had called me Bumptious Q Bang Whistle, I thought she probably would have cried, Oh my God, Bumptious Q Bang Whistle, is that really you? Now she began to lean her shopping bags against my legs, as though I were a convenient fire plug. There were 6 of them, which I would later study at leisure. Her bags from Tiffany's and Bloomingdale's contained mostly rags. Her most valuable possessions were in her basketball shoes. I tried to ignore her. Even as she entrapped me with her bags, I kept my gaze on the face of Leland Clues. "You're looking well, Leland," I said. "I'm feeling fine." To my horror, the shopping bag lady had taken hold of me with her filthy little hand. "This is your wife?" asked Clues. "My what?" I said. "I've never seen this woman before in my life."
Oh, Walter! Walter! She
keened.
How can you say such a thing?
I tried to pry her hand off of me, but the instant I returned my attention to Clues, she snapped it onto my wrist again.
Oh, Walter,
she lamented.
What has become of you? You're not the Walter F. Starbuck I knew.
That's right, I said, because you never knew any Walter Starbuck at all. And the shopping bag lady offered some proof that she really did know me by mentioning the maiden name of my deceased wife. I took another look at her and realized that we had been together during my senior year at Harvard. She was one of the 4 women I had ever loved. She was the first woman with whom I'd had anything like a mature relationship. She was the remains of Mary Kathleen O'Looney. Mary Kathleen's shopping bags were still banked around my legs, and I was immobilized. She grasped my wrist and would not lower her voice.
Now that I've found you, Walter,
she cried,
I'll never let you go again.
Nowhere in the world is this sort of theater being done anymore. I can testify from personal experience that great crowds can still be gathered by this type of melodrama.
You used to tell me all the time how much you loved me, Walter,
she cried.
But then you went away, and I never heard from you again. Were you just lying to me?
I may have made some responsive sounds. Blah, perhaps, or fluh.
Look me in the eye, Walter,
she said. Mary Kathleen and I must have seemed like a miracle to the crowd that had gathered. The rescue of at least one shopping bag lady by a man who knew her well. Some people were crying. I myself was about to cry.
Hug her,
said a woman in the crowd. I did so. I found myself embracing a bundle of dry twigs that was wrapped in rags. That was when I myself began to cry. I stood there, hugging her and crying for the first time since my wife had died in our little brick bungalow in Chevy Chase, Maryland.
My sermon today is entitled, Open Your Arms If You Want to Be Held, a sermon towards devotion. In our reading earlier, Kurt Vonnegut Jr. gives us one of his quirky but poignant vignettes of a ragged street person named Mary Kathleen O'Looney, who surrounds a long-lost love named Walter F. Starbuck in a busy city plaza. She encircles him with her shopping bags and takes hold of his wrist. She will not lower her voice. Now that I've found you, I will never let you go. Look me in the eye, Walter, she says. You used to tell me all the time how much you loved me. Were you just lying to me? Vonnegut notes how this kind of melodrama always draws a crowd. And sure enough, people surround them in the plaza. Some people were crying, the story goes. I myself was about to cry, admits the narrator, who finally comes to recognize the bag lady as one of the 4 women he had ever loved. Hug her, said a woman in the crowd. I did so, he writes. I found myself embracing a dry bundle of twigs that was wrapped in rags. And that's when I too began to cry. I first heard this story in a sermon delivered by the minister of my home church, the Reverend Gary Smith, many years ago, and I've never forgotten it, because Vonnegut's tale moves us and transports us into terrain laden with emotional landmines. This touching episode of a bundle of dry twigs wrapped in rags and the former lover she yearns to hug leads us to a few basic but crucial questions. In your heart of hearts, you'll each know how these questions pertain to your individual lives, if at all. What do you think love is? Are you willing to treat your beloveds as beloveds? When it is hardest to love, will you strive to love harder? Will you allow fear and pride, anger, and unhealthy behavior to keep you from the hug that might be waiting just on the other side of these self-imposed barriers? Open your arms if you want to be held, the Sufi poet Rumi instructs us. What might it take to do this very healing thing with the ones you consider nearest and dearest? Literally, if they are in your pandemic pod, or metaphorically beyond it. Those of us who minister can tell you about couples, gay and straight, who seek us out to talk joyfully about their upcoming weddings or services of union, as well as those who come to our offices, including Zoom rooms, to cry and tell us about the bumps in their partnerships. A colleague of mine noted that all of these meetings increase our awareness of three things: how deep and enduring is the human need for strong attachment, how deep and enduring is the human need to be affirmed in our own way, and how fragile are the bonds that keep us connected if both partners do not begin from an awareness of the crucial need to nurture the relationship as it unfolds. It should go without saying that in order to nurture a relationship, one needs to acknowledge there is a relationship in the first place, the dreaded R word. As humorist Dave Barry explains, clearly for a heterosexual audience, this nod is not automatic, especially for his fellow cisgendered straight males. Barry writes this to his female readers. Never assume that a guy understands that you and he have a relationship. The guy will not realize this on his own. You have to plant the idea in his mind constantly by making subtle references to it in your everyday conversation, such as, Roger, would you mind passing the sweet and low in as much as we have a relationship? Wake up, Roger. There's a prowler in the den, and we have a relationship. You and I mean, not the prowler and me. Good news, Roger. The doctor says we're going to have our fourth child, which will serve as yet another indication that we have a relationship. And Roger, although you forgot our anniversary again, I want you to know it has been a wonderful 53 years of marriage together, which, by the way, clearly constitutes a relationship. Barry's spot-on humor does make us laugh, but the truth behind the wit also skewers our hearts. Relationships are hard. They require effort and vigilance. The truth is underscored by the multitude of books and tapes, workbooks, seminars, and counseling regimes designed to help us dig up our rosy illusions about relationships, and in their place, plant more firmly rooted methods for loving others well in the real world and accepting love from others in the real world. Arguably, one of the most famous prescriptions for love appears in St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians in the New Testament. This idealized but wise view of love is not surprisingly one of the most popular readings for wedding ceremonies. Of course, if this love litany came with step-by-step, easy-to-follow instructions, we'd likely see a drop in the need for marital counseling, in domestic abuse cases, and in the demoralizing 48% divorce rate in America. Many of us know these words well, or at least they're familiar. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Gulp. Although this definition appears hopelessly simplistic and unattainable, Paul does give us a love that is a revolutionary act. And like all revolutionary acts, this love of Paul's requires elbow grease, self-reflection, and discipline. He never claims it's going to be a breeze, and many of us can attest that it isn't. There have been many a time when the last thing we've wanted to do was give or receive a hug. But Paul's love is an abiding love, which recognizes that although affection and passion may ebb and flow, commitment and compassion can and should remain steadfast. It is spiritual union. It is a love for grown-ups. It's a love that asks us to get out of our own way. It is a love that asks us to endure rather than give up. In its most fearless form, it is, in the words of poet Alice Walker, a dangerous and unfashionable love. Let us be poor in all things but truth and courage, Alice Walker encourages us. Love endures all things, writes Paul. Hug her, said a woman in the crowd. And I'm recalling now how this plea in Vonnegut's story comes after Mary Catherine O'Looney, desperate for acknowledgement, has cried out, "You used to tell me all the time how much you loved me, Walter. Were you just lying to me?" Her words spring from the page and they pierce our hearts. How personally some of us relate to her anguish. Surely, not all relationships do endure all things. Not all relationships are salvageable, no matter how hard we try or how bravely we keep at it. I realize that, especially given my work with people who are experiencing divorce, despite their best efforts. If you've struggled and been wounded in an unhealthy relationship that has ended, my heart is with you. If you are suffering now, my heart is with you. If you are not in a relationship and yearning, my heart is with you. If you are locked down and lonely and touch hungry, as many of us are, my heart is with you. Try to hear my words in the broader context of the relationships in your life, past, present, and maybe future. In certain cases, disengagement does equal self-care, and right relationship means no visible bond at all. Absolutely, especially if there's been abuse of any kind. There are times, though, when we feel safe enough and optimistic enough to reinvest in our partnerships despite past disappointments or the inescapable challenges down the road. For the couples who meet with me for marriage preparation, that means getting ahead of the curve, learning key communication skills, and how to turn towards one another to develop and sustain real intimacy. In every wedding ceremony, I share my #1 motto for successful relationships: hug first, solve problems second. I teach that to parents too. In a fable from the Hasidic tradition, a discouraged man tells his rabbi, "The feeling I have for my wife comes and goes. I used to love her more. What should I do?" "Love her now," responds the rabbi. But you don't understand. The feeling of love just isn't there sometimes. Yes, I understand, says the rabbi. If the feeling isn't there, that's a good reason to find the love for her, if you can. But how do you love when you don't love, when you're angry or resentful, the man asks. Love is a verb, answers the rabbi. It's a choice. So love her, listen to her, affirm her. Are you willing to do that? I want to, admits the man, but sometimes I'm so afraid. Oh, beloved, how numerous are my fears. I shall withstand all my fears as they arise in me, laments the psalmist. What is it we so often fear in our relationships? Loss of control, betrayal, being totally exposed to our partner, closing ourselves off from other imagined prospects, rejection. Are we afraid that we are essentially unlovable, so we craft a script that validates our theory? The way I see it, a vital relationship is not meant to be like a ship in a harbor. There is danger built into it because a mature partnership bars the way out or a quick fix. It must set out on the open sea. It demands change and compromise, ever deepening self-awareness and the capacity to accept difference, the ability to struggle, to endure, to grow together, to clearly express needs, and to forgive. But our fears can hold us back, and surely some of those fears are valid. Perhaps we've wanted to hug or be hugged by a partner, and we have been met repeatedly with a coolness that has closed down our hearts little by little. We've been punished instead of sheltered. We've withheld rather than abided, or vice versa. If we are fortunate, if we are paying attention, fate and circumstance break our hearts open and give us a kind of window to wisdom and courage. And we become more compassionate and humble, caring and brave in spite of ourselves. The author Anne Morrow Lindbergh of Gifts of the Sea fame, many of us are familiar with her, she gives us as eloquent a description of open-hearted partnership as we might find. This is somewhat ironic, since her autobiographies reveal the cold marriage she endured with her emotionally aloof but publicly charming husband, the mythic Charles Lindbergh. One can imagine that she ached for the graceful dance between partners who, in her words, moved to the same rhythm, creating a pattern together and being invisibly nourished by it. The joy of such a pattern, she wrote, is not only the joy of creation or the joy of participation, it is also the joy of living in the moment. There is no place for the possessive clutch, the clinging arm, or the heavy hand. And Lindbergh is right on target. A loving hug given in trust and openness carries a very different quality of connection than grab and clutch and cling. It is, as the poet Marge Piercy defines, to have without holding. How well some of us know the pain of loving wide open, Piercy's words, especially if we've attempted it and we've had our hearts stomped on. Even so, loving wide open is the true path of the beloved, and it is doable. To stretch the muscles, to thwart the reflexes of grab, of clutch, of withdrawal, of punishing, to love with minimized malice, learning along the way how to love. Piercy summarizes the how-to portion of this equation when she describes the process as one of loving consciously, conscientiously, concretely, and constructively. What might these adverbs mean to you personally in your individual relationships? Loving consciously, loving concretely, loving constructively. Yes, it will be dangerous. Yes, it will be challenging. And yes, it may lead to a depth of intimacy and union you've never experienced or even dreamed was possible. As my colleague, the Reverend Thea Nightfield suggests, welcoming the sacred beloved into human belovedness becomes a practice, a way to nurture spiritual growth. A commitment to love intentionally keeps us committed to a life of truth-telling. And rather than tightening our grips on our partners, we liberate them. In effect, we say, I trust you to love me honorably out of your own free will. This is a great gift to give a partner, certainly more precious and enduring than flowers or chocolates. Speaking of which, Valentine's Day, in case you haven't noticed, we're in the season. FTD and Godiva will hate me for this, but here goes. Roses wilt, cultivate attentiveness. Valentines get tossed in memory boxes. Try respect. Charm fades. Develop humility. Chocolate goes right to the hips. Focus on your heart. Romantic love puts stars in our eyes, yet only a clear vision of how we interact and how we might better interact with our partners will see us through the inevitable fog that descends on even the best relationships, especially in this maybe I do world. In her poem entitled The Hug, Tess Gallagher reminds us of what we, like the disheveled Mary Kathleen O'Looney, often yearn for in our most intimate relationships, but which sometimes we push away or neglect to give through fear or pride or by not loving consciously. So I walk over to him, Tess Gallagher writes, and put my arms around him and try to hug him like I mean it. I put my head into his chest and snuggle in. I lean into him. I lean my blood and my wishes into him. He stands for it. This is his, and he's starting to give it back so well. I know he's getting it. This hug, so truly, so tenderly, we stop having arms. Clearly, a little permission is a dangerous thing, Gallagher continues. But when you hug someone, you want it to be a masterpiece of connection, the way the button on his coat will leave the imprint of a planet in my cheek when I walk away, when I try to find some place to go back to. So if you can, give permission. Leave an imprint on another's cheek. Love with the doors banging on the hinges. Glow on the street like a neon raspberry. Acknowledge and honor the relationship. Gather blossoms under fire. Be brazenly devoted. Open your arms if you want to be held. Hug her. Hug him. Hug them, said this woman in the crowd. Blessed be, blessed we, and amen.
Faith, hope, love, these three I offer you. Faith that living affirms, hope that caring illumines, love that matters more than anything. Faith, hope, love, these three Not as gifts I offer them, for they are not mine to give. They are yours and mine to share, humbly with one another. Fumbling, we hold their promise in our hands. Faintly, we speak the trembling words. Faith, hope, love, these three I offer you.
We have been warmed by fires we did not build. We have drunk at wells we did not dig. In gratitude of our many blessings and many needs, this morning's offering for this community will now be received.
To have without holding, Marge, Piercy. Learning to love differently is hard. Love with the hands wide open. Love with the doors banging on the hinges, the cupboard unlocked, the wind roaring and whimpering in the rooms, rustling the sheets and snapping the blinds. That thwack like rubber bands in an open palm. It hurts to thwart the reflexes of grab, of clutch, to love and let go again and again, to love consciously, concretely, constructively. I can't do it, you say. It's killing me. But you thrive. You glow on the street like a neon raspberry. You float and sail like a helium balloon. To have and not to hold. To love with minimized malice. Hunger and anger, moment by moment, balanced.
Everybody's got to live together. All the people got to understand. Love your neighbor like you love your brother. Come on and join the band. All you need is love and understanding. Ring the bell and let the people know. We're so happy and we're celebrating. Let the feeling show. Love is all you need. 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 Love is Makes you happy that we're all together at the ball in nature's countryside. And although we're wearing different faces, nobody wants to hide. Love is all you need. 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 All you need is love and understanding. Ring the bell and let the people know. So love your neighbor like you love your brother. Let your feelings show. Love is all you need. 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 Love is all you
We extinguish the chalice here that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this space. May it guide your way until we are together again.
Be true, be well, be loving. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection, our concerns, our care for each other. Our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be true, be loving.